Hi, welcome to the small shed. This week on the Cyclekart I'm hoping to get the cockpit sorted. See you in a minute. I couldn't help but notice the other day when I'd got the chassis in the conservatory that I'd missed the fact that that cross rail is not quite in properly. Doesn't matter because it's effectively a spacer between the two rails, but it's throwing out the fit of the floor panels. So I'm just going to take that off first, reorganise that hole slightly. It's not ideal, but effectively they're being clamped, so it should be okay. I'm not really happy with it as it is. It's about 3 or 4 mil out. As you can see, there's plenty of clamping length in there, and the bolts you can see it's already trying to go back to where it wants to be. So I'll just, although it's a bit of a bodge, I've just got to make that hole a little bit more oval. Push that back into position. Right, that's sorted that out. Time to move on and do the back new bulkhead I've got to put in here. Start and measure up for that. So here I am 6 months on from the last time I was in the conservatory with the cart. In some ways it's no different. At that stage it was very much a mock-up made out of plywood. But essentially it was the same as this. But I've now reached the point with this where all of this front end is now finished. Really that's sort of almost ready to put into paint. Front suspension's sorted apart from fixing brackets to the side of the frame, which I'll get round to very shortly. But I thought it was time to have another look at this getting in and out, because it's been a constant source of concern that I'm not going to have enough room in this because it is so tight in there. So I've just hung the steering wheel or the steering column roughly in the right place. It'll be back a bit further than that. I think that's about right. I haven't got the side bits done, but I can't do those until I know where the back is going to go, because it's all one piece up to this bulkhead here. So to get in, I mean, there'll be a side to step over, but to do that, step in, get on the seat. Again, it would be useful to have the side bits to actually rest on. But I can, without too much trouble, lower myself down and get into the cart, and I've got plenty of room here. The wheel can go on. I may need to lift that a bit because it's pretty much down on my legs at the moment, and as I say, the biggest problem at the moment is getting out, primarily because of this lack of push-up, that I haven't got anywhere to grab hold of other than this. So if I try it without, even off the rails, I'm kind of struggling to get that first push up, which I need something down here, I think, like that will enable me to push up. From there on, again, something on the other side, and it might be okay. Okay, so 2 tea trays to the rescue. That gives me handholds at the right sort of height now to get in and out with. Those are roughly the sort of height that the sides would be, and I think we're immediately a little bit better off from that point of view. Now then, the difficult bit is to dismount, and that, as I say, is where I need that, which is looking to be the answer. And if right, so I've now got the back rail mounted. I haven't tightened it right up, it's been tight once before, but I'm just working on getting the floor in. That's now cut to size. I need to make a piece of die bond just to fit over that, and I'm just getting onto the rear bulkhead. Now I've temporarily clamped it in place, which gives me a position on this back rail as to where the outside of the body is going to be roughly when the tail section goes off that way. And you can see that what's happening now is that we're starting to, rather than have the bodywork taper out, which it did all the way up to the scuttle, it's now going to start and cut back in so that it will strike the rear bulkhead about there, and the frame legs will carry on going out and carry the rear axle on top of that. Right, so I've taken the sections out of this back bulkhead rail to take the bodywork panels. I've cut 2 lengths of timber that will be the bottom rails now, and they will fit in either side like that. And what I'm going to do then, there are some, because the seat back comes up to just below the, about shoulder level actually, I'm going to put 2 vertical pieces on there like that. I'm going to put a small piece at the front, something like that, which will just frame that up, and then there'll be an intermediate rail below the hinge flap and the cutout bit for the arm. Should be about there. That'll frame it all up, and once that's in I can then skin this whole these 2 sections again, and they'll essentially, those will then bolt both the scuttle and then back to the bulkhead, and that will give me, if you like, the break joint between the tail section and this, and it essentially that then gives me the whole of the cockpit. Right, so that's got me the 2 frames made for the cockpit area. I'll put the template on just to get a rough idea of how everything goes. You can see this side the rail is lower than that side, because on this side we've got the cutout for the cowl that sort of saves people burning themselves on the exhaust and give a bit more room for working. I think it's a hand gear change or something there. On the other side there's just the hinge down flap which will be put on separately, that runs up there, but then again it's similarly, there's just a wraparound of body afterwards. And what I think I'll do is just let a piece of plywood or something in this last bit here curve to the right shape, and then this will just bolt to the bulkhead. But that's got all of the frames made, so I think we need to just glue all this up next, and then we can get it all finally sanded and carved to shape exactly right. Right, just finishing off the timber work to the sides of the cockpit. The left hand side as you sit in it, where there's the cutout for the exhaust guard. There's like a large area cut out for where you can stop getting burnt by the exhaust pipe. So that's a fairly straightforward one with a low level rail just to help me get in and out with. So that one's done. The other one's a bit more complicated because it's where the hinge down flap is on the other side. So I can come up much higher than this one for support, but only up to a point, and then it drops down where that hinging flap is, and I'll need a rail in just to put a piano hinge in, just to drop it open. And I'm just doing a couple of templates for the cockpit sides so that I can get the scoop on and shaping on the panels accurate on both sides, because essentially they're both the same except that the one side has got a piece cut out of that initial shape. This one I'm just doing in card. So I've now got the back of the cart there, front of the scuttle there, or that's the back of the cockpit I should say. That's the scuttle line, and so essentially all I need is to get that line cut out around there like that, and then I can mark that on both of the sides. It. I can overlay that now on the sides and put a permanent marker on it, and we've got mirror image on both sides. That's it. I can take that out with a bandsaw now, which is easier than trying to do it with a knife and snap it. Get a better line I think and be able to file it up after that. Right, so that's got my cockpit sides done. I haven't fixed them at this end yet because that'll give me a little bit of chance to widen out the back end if I want to. I've got the piece of plywood marked up for the cutouts and everything that I need for the back and the front here, and I'll just do a repeat of that back section, cut off higher up for there, and that gives me basically the base for the sides to then go on top. I can then screw those on in die bond. That's the area for the drop down flap, so that's all finished, ready to put a hinge in there and have it so it folds down. Okay, so today's job, I've glued all the framework up. That needs all tidying up now, a bit of sanding and cleaning up. So I'm at the big shed today that I go to, because we've got a bigger flat belt sander. I can get the area that's all covered with cladding on the outside of the cart. I can sand all that down, get the wood sanded, ready to get it tidied up. Right, so the roughed out shapes for the side panels are okay now. That's all assembled, sanded up roughly. Put the back in, I've cut that down and put it to go between the uprights. So I'll bolt through from the sides to fix that. I can't put this piece in that I wanted to support the front of the sticky out bit, because it means I can't do that bolt up very well. I've already cut a piece off it, but it's not really ideal. So I've decided instead to go for 3mm die bond on the sides. It will give me a very slight inconsistency there of 1mm, but I think given the way these things work, that's hardly a major problem. I can fudge it along there because I just push that frame in a bit and it won't matter at the back. The 3mm will help when I do the glass fibre tail, because it means I can join up to it more easily with the 3mm thick glass fibre. I can put a bit more strength in that, so that's okay. Sides will go up and wrap over the top, and I've checked I can bend the 3mm okay, so that works fine. So it gives me a little bit more strength in the sides. So I'm happy with that. Right, that's got one side of the cockpit finished now. That's all pretty much panelled up with the 3mm, and there's no great problem with it between that and the 2mm alongside it, and it does give a solid rigid body panel where I need it. And also I need to get the back sorted, because this piece will actually round over at the top over the bodywork. It curves in where the shoulder part of the rear tail starts, so I've got to sort that out when I've got that profile in. So next up is to go over to the other side and do the same again with that, and then I can do this rear profile business and get the backrest in. Now I've pretty much finished the cladding of this side with the fold down flap. I've got all the bending done on the top. I've got this pretty much smoothed off. It wants a lot of finishing work later on with sandpaper and files and things like that, but essentially it's complete. I've put the hinge on the flap. It'll need a catch on the top like the real thing had, which is fine. It doesn't open all the way, which is like the real one, again because there's a handbrake underneath it, so that's fine. I'm not too bothered about that. Need to trim the bolts off and stick another bolt in there and put a bit of clearance in. What's happened with this now, this has lifted this whole thing up, putting the piano hinge in, which means that that is too high, so I've got to ease that curve on there. But of course it will also mean that it's too high there on the scuttle, so I'll go and fit this now and make sure that's sorted. But other than that, I'm probably as far as I'm going to take it prior to actually testing the cart. I may well take the plastic off and get it back to aluminium, but it's this 3mm die bond with the green covering on it is much nastier than the 2mm with that different green on it, because it stays sticky underneath. All this is horrible, and I've spent a long time with acetone and stuff to get the sticky off it as much as I can before I can even start and get it back to aluminium. But peeling the actual film off just leaves you with a horribly sticky base underneath it. So we'll see how we go with that one. I'm not sure yet whether I'll spend any more time on it until it's ready to actually paint. But that's got that side done. I'll just trim this top to suit and then move on to the other side. Okay, that's got both sides on now and attached to the back, so that's pretty much done it for the cockpit. This side, I may take that little bit of timber out, just put another piece underneath it to strengthen it up because it's very thin there, or I may just leave it because there's a covering blister over that anyway that comes out and around there. It's all rounded over at the top end. There's a lot of sanding still to do, but again that's finishing work rather than getting a rolling chassis. I needed this in order to get the back end with the motor on it sorted, and I think I've done that. I've got this line now so that I can put it all together like this. Those bolts just about go in. I've got to do a tiny bit of fettling there because it's very tight and it just rubs into the die bond a bit, so I need to just alter that line very slightly. But that means the tail can then sit on there, which will be glass fibre, and attach with screws similar positions, so that you've got just two lines of screws all the way down to attach the whole of the tail cone. So I'm happy that that's worked out all right. The curved bits have all worked out okay. All of this will be upholstered, this whole back piece. There's a headrest and everything gets upholstered, and the cowl, the rear tail, just comes on the outside of that. What else we got? I'll take a whole lot of holes out of that later on because that's quite heavy. I've already proved on the nose that taking lumps of this stuff out can save an awful lot of weight. The flap is just waiting for a catch now on that side, and again there's still some bolts to sort out and get fixed, but at least it's now in the right place and it sort of works once the catch is in and this cowl is also sorted to suit. So I've got some blocks in there which are loose at the moment. I've just got to decide whether I want to clamp them to the side rails and drill down with the threaded insert, or go right the way through into the underneath of the chassis, the floor, and put a bolt through from there. Now I've had to think about fixing the back of the cockpit down to the frame rails on the floor. I've put the filler pieces in actually at the moment, just as a cosmetic top layer. That I think can work quite well. The other option was to go, or one option was to go sideways into these slots here with the T-nuts, and then just bolt that block of wood into there sideways on, and then drill down and put a threaded insert and go with fixing the whole cockpit down then onto that block. As it happens, there are two holes in these blocks of wood that were there when I got them. They're scrap bits off a ping pong table. So I think I'm going to reuse those, and I might as well just counterbore them slightly, drop two big bolts right the way down, drill through the floor and put a nut underneath, because there's a little bit of clearance between the floor, underneath of the floor and the bottom of the chassis rail anyway, so I'm not losing any ground clearance. And it's the simplest and most sensible way of fixing that block down. That way it doesn't impinge on this slot at the side, and the reason I'm trying to keep that is for two things. I need to run some cables from the engine to things like the start and probably the battery, so I'm hoping to use it as a conduit for the electricals on one side, and on the other side then I think I'm going to run the brake line inside the frame rail, because again all it means is you pop it in there, you then squeeze some of this little capping onto it, and you've got a totally concealed line running all the length of the car, and you can just pop out in the back end. I've ordered a new cable with banjos on either end, which is about 2 meters long I think, so I should have plenty of room once I've got that sorted to be able to come from the pedal right the way through to the back compartment, and I'll fit that once the brake caliper's fixed. So we've got about a 10mm floor being clamped in the rail either side, so I don't think there's any problem about any possibility of it lifting. Now Ron will be drilling big holes in the nice floor, but there we go. Should also mean I don't have to bolt that glue that die bond down to the floor either. It's loose at the moment and it can stay just loosely attached. Right, it's got those done. That will get those in there, hold that down, and then we'll put a couple of nuts on the underneath. That will get proper nylocks later on. At the moment it's just getting a loose normal nut, purely and simply because once you put a nylock on you can't really reuse it, and I'm taking this thing apart more than once or twice before it finally gets to roll. Right, that's got that fully mounted. Now that's got the frame secured to the blocks secured to the floor. Whole thing is really solid and rigid now, and we can leave the cockpit alone for the moment and move on to the greasy bits. Now, to finish off the last bit of the cockpit, I've just had a catch delivered that's got a little sliding catch on it, spring loaded. That will go in there and engage the side there. It just needs a piece of material the same as that for me to mount the catch on, to bring it out to the right level. And then that means we'll be able to just latch it shut and undo it with a flick of the finger to get it open. So we'll cut a piece of this aluminium. I've got a bit spare down here. Just going to mark that up right size, cut it to shape, and then we can drill it through and attach it to the die bond, and that should give us a working catch. Right, so that's got the cover and the latch sorted. That goes in there like that. I've got to tighten all the bolts up and sort these bottom bolts out, but that's something that I'll do when I come to trim it all up and finally sort it. But that gives me the opening panel that I want and a lock for it. So that's pretty much does the cockpit at last, certainly as far as I'm going to take it at the moment. Right, well that's got us a working cockpit if nothing else. There's still a lot of work to do, long way to go on it, but I'm not worrying about that at the moment. The primary aim is to get the cart up and running first, and we'll worry about things like paint and final tidying up on it and at a later date. Hope the video was of interest. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be doing something different on the Cyclekart. Look forward to seeing you then. Bye!